Podcasts are pretty common. So what makes the Uncommon podcast uncommon? Well, it's all in our name. I'm your host, Noah Weiss, and we at Uncommon Sports Group understand the unique pressures and temptations that come with a career in the sport industry. We provide uncommon training that helps you successfully navigate common challenges. Hit the follow button on this podcast. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Check out our website and become uncommon. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Uncommon Podcast. I'm your host, Noah Weiss, and we are excited to be jumping back into our series, How Did You Get There Today, where present leaders in the sport industry will be sharing with us how they have navigated a career in the sport industry. I'm excited to have Joel Maturi with me in our studio here at USG's headquarters in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Joel, how are you?
I am well. No, it's an honor to be a part of this. Thank you.
Absolutely. And Joel, you've had quite the career in the sport industry, spending time as a student assistant at Notre Dame with none other than Ara Parseghian, working in high school athletics as a coach and administrator, then taking on administration at the collegiate level at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, University of Denver, the University of Miami, Ohio, and finally landing at the University of Minnesota, where you spent 10 years as the director of athletics. And Joel, if you could just start us off by sharing how you got your start in the sport industry as a student assistant for the Notre Dame football team.
Well, let me begin even before that, if I may, Noah. First of all, I've been blessed, and I look back on the career that I've had, and as you age, you fully appreciate the ups and the downs and the challenges and the people who have helped you and assist you to get to where you are. I grew up in northern Minnesota, not far from the Canadian border, in the middle of the Iron Range, and small town. And as my wife tells me, I was a big fish in a little pond, but that was a positive thing in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. Two older brothers who were pretty good athletes at the high school level got me involved because whenever they needed an extra player, I was the guy they grabbed to make up the teams, and that's what you did in the summers in those days. And so athletics became a real passion for me. I had some decent talent. And my mother told me that even in the fourth grade that I had to write a little paragraph of what I wanted to do someday. And I said I wanted to be a coach. In my high school yearbook, ambition, coach. So it was a dream that I had. Notre Dame was also a dream in lots of ways. My dad, who had a very serious injury between his junior and senior year of high school at Chisholm, where I was from in northern Minnesota. Mm-hmm. His best friend went on to the University of Notre Dame and was one of the linemen for the Four Horsemen at Notre Dame. Wow. They called the Seven Mules. Wow. And so my dad became a passionate Notre Dame fan. Even though he was a Gopher fan and he had season tickets to the Gophers, our vacation would be to go to a Notre Dame game once a year since I was 5 years old. And so I had a passion to go there. Wasn't good enough to earn a scholarship, but did get invited to be a walk-on. Wow. Had a couple of other scholarship offers, but Notre Dame was obviously the dream school for me. And so I went to South Bend as a freshman. In those days, you couldn't play as freshmen. You were not eligible to your sophomore year, but obviously you were part of the program. And in all honesty, I joke about it today, but I think they looked at me and they said, gosh, this kid is small and slow. I'm not so sure he can make it. But I was a receiver, and I actually failed the physical exam. I had a very serious injury, which actually happened in the sport of basketball. I ran into a wall. In those days, the end of the court was 2 feet from the brick wall, and I had a pretty a neck injury, and prevented me from really continuing on in my athletic career. But I think, no, it might be the real beginning of me understanding that God had a plan for me.
Absolutely.
And that everything happens for a reason. And I can't tell you of my career later, 20 years as a high school coach and many years, 25 as a college athletic administrator, that I would tell young people who maybe experienced an injury or had a setback of some sort, that there's a plan there. And I share, for me, it was a plan because my freshman year at Notre Dame, when we couldn't play, and I was not a part of the program at all, we were 2-7. We would have been 2-8 that year in football, but that was the year President Kennedy was assassinated, giving away my age, and we didn't play Iowa. So they dismissed their coach, hired a guy by the name of Eric Parsegian, who you mentioned in the introduction.
Yeah.
And I remember going across campus February of my freshman year to see Coach Parsegian. I had the courage to do so in some ways, and he was kind enough to make an appointment with me. And I said, Coach, I'm a small town kid, northern Minnesota. My dream was always to be a coach. I came here to try to play football. I couldn't play. I failed the physical, not involved. Is there some way I can get involved in the program? He gets on the phone in my office, in his office, and calls a man by the name of Gene Paskett. Gene was the head trainer at Notre Dame at the time, and he said, in those days they didn't have all the people that they have today. And he said, I've got a young man in my office that likes to be involved in the program. Do you have a need for any help? And Gene said, sure, send him over. And before I left the coach's office, he said, you can go to all our meetings. You can go to any offensive side of the ball, defensive side of the ball, special teams, whatever it is. He says, I'll help you become a coach.
Wow.
And Noah, I was able to be around the coaches in the coaches' room where they would say things that they would have never said to an athlete. And I just learned so many things, nuances. And if I may continue in the story here, one of them that I tell all the time, one of the things that just impacted me as a coach later on, and quite frankly, even as an administrator, my senior year, where we won the national championship with Coach as the coach, we were 5-0 and ranked number 1 in the country. And our sophomore quarterback and sophomore wide receiver were on the cover of Time magazine. And Era was really upset because these sophomores who played 5 games were on the cover.
Wow.
Not the Alan Pages, who was a classmate senior, not the Jim Lynches, who was our captain, not the Nick Eddies, not the guys who had been there 3-4 years who had built the program. And it's not that he didn't appreciate Terry and so forth and Jim Seymour, but he wanted to thank. And so I was in the coach's office, and he called over Coach Tom Pagna, our quarterbacks coach, and he said, I got to bring Hanratty down to earth. I got to bring the seniors up and tell them that they're the reason where we are, and you know the drill. And he left, and I go up to Coach Pagna and I said, Coach, what's the drill? And he said, something's going to happen in practice, and Era, he called him Era. I already called him Coach. He says, Era's going to get all over Terry for something and kind of bring him down to earth a little bit, and he's going to bring up the upperclassmen because he believes that Terry shouldn't have been on the cover of Time magazine. It should have been somebody else. Not that he doesn't appreciate Kara.
Right.
But after he gets on Terry's case, it's my job to go over and build Terry back up because he never wanted anybody to leave the locker room feeling down.
Yeah.
And you know what? I did that for 20 years as a coach because I'm an emotional Italian, and I probably yelled more than I should have. And I would tell my assistants, you make sure that kid doesn't go home feeling down. And so it's kind of one of those little lessons that I don't know if I would have learned the nuances had I not been in that situation. That's one of 100 stories I could tell you, Noah, that I learned not being the athlete. I learned being around the coach and being around the program. And so it helped me tremendously. And so that's how I got involved at Notre Dame, had a great run, as I mentioned, won the national championship our senior year. We just had our 55th reunion at the Purdue game a month or so ago, whenever it was. And many of the guys came back, and it was wonderful to see them. They always have included me. I'm thankful for that. And we continue to have a great relationship. We have an email that's almost daily, praying for somebody who maybe is ill. We've lost some of our teammates, or to say something wonderful that's happened in one way or the other. And we continue to be very, very close to this day.
Absolutely, and really, it's an amazing testimony there about your time at Notre Dame. 2 things jump out to me. One, growing up a Notre Dame fan myself, just that environment of being around that coaching staff was an incredible opportunity for you.
No question.
One of the top teams in the country still, but even then, more so. And just the fact that you mentioned that you spent time around the staff and learned the nuances by watching and spending time, getting that experience. I think for our students listening, I think that is the biggest highlight to take out of that story is you need to be around these professionals to really learn what it takes to be successful. You can be in any sport management class, you can have any master's degree, but if you're not actually around the actual position you want to be in and learning from people who are doing it, it becomes a lot harder to learn the nuances, like you said. So
No
like,
question.
tremendous
It's really
point.
true. And again, being a Catholic institution, and obviously there are many great public institutions as
Yeah.
well. So I don't mean to say that. But for me at that stage of my life, that was important to me
Yeah.
because of the injury. And which I happens, get the physical and whatever, August or September. And very depressed. Don't know why I'm at Notre Dame. Am I smart enough to be here?
Yeah.
I came here to try to play football and so
Yeah.
forth. And I had a lot of visits to the grotto at Notre Dame and lit a lot of candles. And my faith helped me through that difficult time and continues to do so today.
Yeah, absolutely. And really that faith aspect. I mean, I think about so many people that work in the sport industry now, and especially the students listening to this, they're at a point where they are student assistants or student equipment managers and in positions where they're getting little to no money and spending all this time in it. Man, that can be so defeating. So I think the point about having faith and really just using your faith in Christ to move you past those tough times, I think that's why we exist as an organization. I think that's really the key to staying firm in those tough environments and tough moments.
Well, that's when you need it the most. I mean, God does have a plan, and it's tough sometimes to accept and understand that when something, some tragedy of some sort happens, and it's very difficult. But I do believe if you stay the course, one of my favorite sayings, when I was an athletic administrator, and that means stay with your integrity, stay with your values. And don't compromise. And I think today's world of win-at-all-cost mentality, too many people have compromised, and there have been some ugly ramifications because of it in the long run.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think, talking about staying the course, after you graduated from Notre Dame, you began your career at the high school level as a coach and a director of athletics after your time coaching. So share with us how that experience came about and what you really learned being in the high school level of sports.
Well, I went on after graduating from Notre Dame, I went to the University of Wisconsin to grad school instead of Minnesota, where I'm from, because my high school girlfriend from northern Minnesota was a year younger than I, and she was at Marquette in Milwaukee.
Oh, yeah.
And so I went to get closer to her. So that's how I got there. I entered a Master's of Arts and Teaching program. Notre Dame did not have an educational component, did not have a Phi-Ed or kinesiology component.
Right.
And so I needed to do that to get certified to teach and to hopefully coach at the high school level. And I interned in Wausau, Wisconsin, the second semester of that graduate year.
Yeah.
And the person who interviewed in that interned in that same class, same Master's of Arts and Teaching program, the first semester had graduated from Edgewood High School, a Catholic high school in Madison, Wisconsin. And she said, Edgewood has an opening for a social studies teacher, because that was my major was political science, and so that was my my major. And she said, because she had already gotten a job, and so she stated that. I called the school. Sister Kathleen O'Connell was the principal of the school, and I came and interviewed with her and said, is there an opportunity for me to coach as well? Because that's really my passion. Obviously, I want to teach and I want to coach, and I understand that's what it goes with.
Yeah.
She introduced me to a man by the name of George Christ, if you understand that last name. And so George Christ was the father of Paul Christ, who's now the coach at the University of Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And so George was excited to have me on his staff, and I became his assistant in football and basketball. And for the first year, I was the head track coach, and then the second year, baseball, which I was more familiar with, became the head baseball coach. And the third year, because I had a chance to move on and be a head football coach myself at Eau Claire Regis High School, not too far here from the Twin Cities.
Yeah.
And George and I had a great relationship, and he said, you know what, I'm coaching both. Time for me to give one of them up. You take over the basketball job and still be my assistant in football. And so that's what happened. My third year at this Catholic high school, continued to teach. And so I was the assistant football, head basketball, and head baseball coach. Wow. And then a year later, George moved on to the University of Wisconsin as an assistant coach.
Yeah.
So I became the head football coach and the athletic director.
Wow.
I gave up the baseball. And so I was the head football and basketball and athletic director at the school, and stayed there for 19 years.
Wow.
Had some success coaching. Fortunately, had some really good athletes, really good kids, great school. Never thought I would leave. No, I fit well. Wasn't making a whole lot of money, but that's what happened in those days in those small schools. And ended up marrying somebody other than that high school girlfriend from Madison, Wisconsin, and we had 3 wonderful children who all went to that high school and graduated from that school.
Yeah.
My oldest son ended up going to Wisconsin. My oldest daughter went to Notre Dame, and my youngest daughter went to Miami of Ohio.
Nice.
So we've kind of notched a little belt at each of the places for the most part that I've been.
Totally. Yeah, I just love sharing that story of really loving that kind of small field and really taking on different roles. I said baseball, football, being the athletic director. I mean, that is a lot to take on, but also tremendous experience and tremendous ability to really have an impact on students and on the kids, which would, I mean, I'm sure in turn translated to your future endeavors in college athletics.
Well, it really
awesome.
does, and I think and I again, when I speak to classes and to other groups, I share it often. The wonderful thing about a smaller private school is you had to do everything.
Absolutely.
That's just part of the deal. I mean, in all honesty, I cut the grass at the football field. I lined the fields. I swept the court before the basketball. I set up the concession stand in the Pepsi cans, and I did all that along with athletes who helped pull out the bleachers and do all those kinds of things. And so you did all of it, but it taught you what had to be done. I think sometimes, as the case goes, some people are born on third base. They haven't paid their dues, so to speak.
Right.
And I think when you're at that level, you pay your dues, but you learn and you learn and you learn, and it helped me. Really, when I ended up making the step, to the Division I, from high school to Division I, which is kind of unheard of.
Yeah.
When I made that step, because my first job at Wisconsin was as facilities and event management, and that's really what I did at the high school level. Obviously it's much bigger at a Wisconsin, much more visible and much more public, but it's really the same job.
Yeah.
I mean the football's still the same length, and the grass has got to be cut, and the line's lined, and the court is a little longer, but everything's the same, and so all that experience that I did at that private school for all those years prepared me really quite well for the collegiate model.
Yeah, absolutely. You talk about that collegiate jump from high school to Division I, like you said, it is pretty unheard of. So kind of talk about just how that came about and what that transition was like coming from high school to college athletics and college administration.
Well, I never thought I'd leave high school because I loved coaching, and it was, again, that's that ambition that I had, the dream of fulfilling, and had some success doing so. Certainly never thought I'd go from high school to Division I athletic administration.
Right.
I thought, if anything, maybe I'd go on to college coaching, and I looked at a few opportunities, and nothing came through, and so for different factors and different reasons. And you got to remember, back in the mid '80s, Wisconsin athletic department was broke. There were millions of dollars in debt. Their football team was not winning. Their basketball team was not winning, unlike today when you look at their program and you see what it is. Yeah. In fact, after we won the national championship my senior year at Notre Dame, my first year in Madison, they won one game, and my second year, they didn't win any.
Wow.
That's how bad the program was. Wow. And so they were very poor. And basketball wasn't very good. They hadn't gotten to the postseason in years, many, many years. Yeah. And so I think I got a call because, again, I had been there 19 years. The high school that I was at is 6 blocks from Camp Randall Stadium, where the Wisconsin Badgers are down to play football, but it's where their athletic administration offices are. Yeah. And so I knew everybody. I had worked the football camps. I'd worked the basketball camps. I knew the athletic director. I knew everybody involved. And then out of the blue, I ended up getting a call asking if I might be interested in being an assistant athletic director in charge of facilities and events. I think they looked at my background and what it is, and they could afford me because I wasn't making any money at the Catholic high school, and they were really broke. And so I talked it over with my wife. I liked administration. I don't like to judge what I'm good at or not, but I like structure. I like being organized, and I think that. I said, what the heck, we'll look into it. And so I looked into it. I ended up getting the job. Interestingly, they hired me in December of 1986, but I was still coaching basketball in the middle of the season. Yeah. And I said, I can't leave my basketball team. And I said, if that means I don't get the job, I understand it. Yeah. But again, that goes back a little bit to your values. I committed to these kids. I committed to that program. Yeah. And I said, but, I don't know what I was at the time, 40-some years old. And I said, I'm committed to Wisconsin, but it's going to have to wait until after the basketball season. Yeah. And so they allowed me to do that. I waited to the end of the basketball season, and then I kind of worked both at the high school and the university until the end of the school year at the high school. because again, I didn't want to leave them high and dry, and Wisconsin was very understanding. But that's how I got the job. I was there at the right time at the right place. They weren't winning; they were really struggling. An individual who was in charge of football and basketball at the time, and hockey as a sport administrator, retired a year after I was there.
Okay.
And the new athletic director realized what a messed up place Wisconsin was at the time, approached me and said, I know you're not a part of the mess because you weren't here. How would you like to be a supervisor for football, basketball, and hockey?
Wow.
Okay. No, I'm 1 year removed from being a high school coach.
Yeah.
Now I'm overseeing a Big Ten coach and overseeing. It makes no sense.
Yeah.
But it is what it is.
Yeah.
And so again, quite frankly, again, can't say it to a lot of audiences, but I did a lot of praying and did a lot of said, hey, this position God has put me in, and I'm here to just do the best that I possibly can.
Totally.
I'm sure I made my share of mistakes, but I think it also taught me, which I think many people have applauded me for in my career later on, is I just was available. I went to practices. I got to know the kids. It was a relationship type of thing,
Totally.
and then you try to seek the right answers for the decisions that you have to make.
Yeah.
And again, I repeat, many of the decisions aren't any different than the high school level. They're just magnified. But that's the same kind of decision. When kids are having trouble, you do a certain thing. When kids make a mistake, you respond in a certain way. Whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And so I did that, and I was fortunate that actually I worked for 3 ADs. Elroy Hirsch, legendary person, the younger crowd would not know, but hired me. Abe Sponberg came on for a short period of time, and then Pat Richter came as my third AD in my third year.
Yeah.
And Pat and I had a great relationship, and he did a wonderful job of hiring people like Barry Alvarez, hiring people like Dick Bennett and Bo Ryan, and Wisconsin's fortunes just changed, and I was just honored to be a part of that transition.
Totally.
Don't take any credit for it, but by the time I left Wisconsin in '96, they had been to Rose Bowls, they had been back to the NCAA basketball tournament, they had gotten to the point where they were starting building the Kohl Center, the new facility for which now plays where they play basketball and hockey, and certainly the renovations to Camp Randall Stadium. So it's a long way from the high school where my football team used to clean Camp Randall Stadium after home games to raise money for the school and for the athletic department to now overseeing that whole bailiwick.
Wow, it's incredible, and I think really. Just what you said, it's being around those kids and relationship building. That is so key, regardless of your level of status in the program, no matter what position you're in, whether it is a coach or whether it is an administrator, you got to be around the kids. You got to build those relationships. I love that you said that, and I think that is undervalued today. I think nowadays we sometimes get in positions of leadership and feel that we're above relationship building. We're more so just decision makers, and that isn't true. So I love that you pointed that out and made that clear.
Yeah, and I get nervous about, obviously the COVID has changed our world, and we've all had to adjust, and the Zoom meetings that we've had, and even the technology with the texting and the email and everything else.
Yeah.
It used to bother me even here in Minnesota. I would say, somebody would text me and they'd be 2 doors down. And I would say, no. Come into my office. We need to do this. And I think the same thing is true, with so many people working from home. I get it. I'm not here to be judgmental, but I think we're losing out on that real togetherness that I think in some aspects, in some careers, are even more important than the work that is being done.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And I'd even say the athletics realm is a place where relationship building is key. It's one of those industries that is like that. So that's a tremendous point. And what's cool, that reading your stories, you did make a transition to the University of Denver in 1996, became the athletics director of the university, and share with us what that transition was like and how you set yourself up to be granted that position of leadership.
Well, I never thought I'd leave coaching. And then I got into athletic administration at Wisconsin. Never thought I'd leave Wisconsin. And in some ways, I've told my children and, again, others, that, every time you take a job, you may want to build it for hopefully another one, but take it thinking it may be the last one you'll ever have, which is okay. Make it the best that you possibly can.
Totally.
So I never thought I'd leave. Interestingly enough, because I became involved in hockey, even though I played basketball and then coached basketball, every step I've been collegially has partly been because of hockey. WCHA at that time, very competitive hockey conference.
Yeah.
Denver was in our conference. I knew the coach at Denver. They were looking for a new AD, and he said, how about if I nominate you to be the athletic director at the University of Denver? This is my 9 years now as assistant and then associate AD at Wisconsin. And I talked it over with my wife. 2 of our kids were in college. Our youngest was a junior in high school. We talked it over with her, and she kind of said, okay, I'll move to Denver if we were to get the job.
Yeah.
And so I went forward and applied for it and followed through, and I ended up getting the job at the University of Denver.
Yeah.
It's another lesson I learned in life. I think I got caught up in the recruiting aspect. I was excited about that. Going to be a few more dollars, which is fine. Denver was a great city.
Yeah.
Lots of positives, but it was not a good fit for me in the end. And that's nobody's fault but my own in some ways.
Yeah.
Again, a quick story, if I may. A wonderful chancellor, a wonderful human being, who was never in the athletic world, nor really in the academic world. He was very successful as a business person, had taken over the university and done a great job with the university. And Denver was Division II at the time.
Yeah.
And except in one sport on the men's side, which was hockey, and one on the women's side, which was gymnastics, which is still allowed by NCAA rules. You can't be in football or basketball. To be Division I football or basketball, you have to be Division I in all sports.
Got it.
But we were to raise all the other programs to Division I status, and that excited me to be involved in that process and establish the program. And so I was excited about bringing some of the things that I had learned at Wisconsin to do that. And I get there, and the chancellor says, well, you need to fire the men's basketball coach. And, what do you do? I mean, your boss tells you to fire the men's basketball coach. And even though I hadn't evaluated it that way, I get it.
Yeah.
And so I asked him what process I had to go through. In those days, you had committees, you had the athletes and former athletes, and you had faculty, and you had donors and different groupings. And I brought in 4 candidates. I brought in an assistant at Colorado, an assistant at Stanford, a head coach at a smaller school in Texas, and somebody that I wanted, who I knew. I wanted this individual to be, but again, I had to go through this process.
Totally.
And the chancellor had interviewed all 4, but as all these groups did. Well, fortunately, in some ways for me, all the groups liked the guy that I wanted to hire.
Yeah.
And so I'm all excited about it. I told him I was going to offer him the job, but I had to get the clearance through the chancellor. I had to establish the money. I can't pay you as much as the hockey coach yet because he's been Division I, and we'll get you there.
Yeah.
And he understood. And so I go to the chancellor and I say, I want to hire this guy. And he says, Joel, you can't hire him. I go, Chancellor, why can't I hire him? He said, Joel, I made you fire a Division II coach. You can't hire a Division III coach. I was going to hire a guy by the name of Bo Ryan.
Wow.
Who obviously went on for unbelievable success at the University of Wisconsin. Bo had accepted the job with me, but my chancellor wouldn't let me hire him.
Wow.
I was hurt by that. I'm new in the job. I accepted it. And again, you learn, you move and you move on.
Yeah.
6 months later, in the spring, maybe a little longer than 6 months, a little later in that year, the women's gymnastics athletes, the Division I program, came to me. And they were having lots of struggles, not uncommon, eating disorders, things of this nature.
Yeah.
And they had told me that the male coach had been there 17 years, very successful coach. He was weighing the young ladies himself daily. Again, we were Division II. We didn't have all the personnel to do all these things.
Right.
He was body fat testing them once a week. He was saying things, according to the young women, he was saying things like, your ass is sticking out of your leotard, you got to get yourself in, all this type of thing. So I brought him into my office, and I said to him, Dan, his name was Dan Garcia, I said, Coach, you've been coaching many years, you've had a lot of success. I know you don't mean harm, but things have changed. We're going Division I, things have changed. We are now going to have a sports medicine staff to take care of weighing the kids, body fat testing the kids. We're going to have a strength and conditioning staff to get them in shape for you and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And so I'm talking to him just like I'm talking to you. I'd like to think in a calm voice. And he says to me, he says, you know what? You're my 5th AD. I can hardly wait to get my 6th. That's how he responded to me.
Wow.
So I go to the chancellor and I say to the chancellor, Chancellor, he will not be our gymnastics coach next year. And chancellor says, you can't fire him. He's the best coach we have. I said, Chancellor, in all due respect, I don't have a huge ego, I don't think, but I can't hire who I want. I can't fire who I want. I can't build the team that I want. I said, I can't afford to leave. I have 2 kids in college, and one's going to go in another year. I said, but I'll be honest with you, I'm going to look. And he says, that's fine. You do what you have to do. So, again, he was a wonderful man, did a great job for that school, but didn't fit me and my personality. Not knowing what my future was. Like I said, I couldn't afford to leave.
Right. Interestingly
enough, we had hosted a hockey tournament in Denver, and Miami of Ohio was looking for a new AD.
Yeah.
And the hockey coach asked me if I'd be interested in looking at it because of what had happened. I was.
Yeah.
Interviewed for the job, got the job, needed to tell the story. I go back and I tell the chancellor that I'm going to take the job at Miami. And he says, you need to stay. He said, I'll double your salary. Please stay. I said, Chancellor, it's never been about money. That's not who I am, whatever it is. But I just need to have some decisions. And he said he understood. So I was going to stay another month or whatever it is, to fix things up. My last day on the job, he calls me up. And he said, will you do me a favor? I said, Chancellor, what would you like me to do? He says, will you fire the gymnastics coach?
Wow.
The young women had gone to him, shared with him the same stories that they shared with me. Obviously more impactful coming right from them.
Yeah.
And so my last day on the job, I did fire the gymnastics coach. I'm not proud of it, but it was the right thing to do for that program. And some things, as they say, come around and go around. And so I ended up leaving and going to Miami after a short stint at Denver. That would not who I am, not what I would be.
Yeah.
But Miami was a great fit, just a great fit.
Yeah. And I really do love that story, even though it was a difficult situation at Denver. But I think for our students listening, a reminder that even though you do get a position that may be on paper amazing, right? Director of athletics at a nice school in Denver, a great city, like you said, it checked all the boxes. But at the end of the day, you got there, and the situation wasn't exactly what you thought it was.
And that's why I say people make sure you check all the boxes, find out who you're working for, what power do you have, what do you need, and what is the vision that they have for you, and so on and so forth. And like I said, it wasn't a good fit. Lots of good things about it and wonderful people, but it wasn't a good fit.
Hey everybody, thank you for listening to part 1 of this week's How Did You Get There episode with former University of Minnesota Director of Athletics, Joel Maturi. We hope that Joel's words are helping you become a Christ-centered leader of the sport industry. You can hear the second part of Joel's story on December 3rd, and you won't want to miss it, as Joel has a special opportunity to connect with him for those who are listening. The episode will be available on all platforms and on our YouTube channel. If you love what you're hearing and you want to get involved with Uncommon Sports Group and the mission that we are on to help you navigate the sport industry as followers of Christ, apply for our USG Academy on our website at uncommonSG.org. That's uncommonSG.org. Be sure to tune in to a special holiday episode of the Uncommon Podcast this Tuesday at midnight Eastern Time, as well as the second part of this episode on December 3rd. Until next time, we pray that you will strive to be uncommon by glorifying the name of God in whatever you may do. See you next week.